In class, we've been talking about something called scaling, and we're going to continue that discussion today. So our I can statement for the week has been, I can think of multiplication as the scaling or resizing of a number, and we define scaling as to increase or decrease proportionally in size. So increase obviously means to go up, decrease means to go down. Yesterday we talked about some of the patterns that we saw. If I were to multiply 1/5 times 1/3, okay, I'm going to get 1/15. 1/15, I can change my equal sign. 1/15 is going to be less than, I'm going to put my equal sign back in. 1/15 is going to be less than 1/5. Okay, 1/15 is also going to be less than 1/3. However, if we were to multiply 1/5 by 5, well, I would have 1/5 times 5/1. That would give me 5/5, and 5/5 is going to equal 1. Therefore, 1 is greater than 1/5. So we noticed a couple patterns yesterday. Anytime you multiply a fraction by a fraction, you're going to get an answer that's less. Anytime that you multiply a fraction by a whole number, your product, your answer is going to be greater than your starting fraction, 1/5. Okay, but then what if we multiply by a mixed number? So what if I have 1/5 times 2 and 1/5? So I know I have to make this into a mixed number before I multiply, or I have to make it into an improper fraction before I multiply. So I have to make it math. So 2 times 5 is 10, 10 plus 1 is 11. So I end up having 1/5 times 11/5. And when I multiply this over, I get 11/25. Okay, now 11/25 is going to be bigger than 1/5. Okay, so we noticed those patterns yesterday in class, and we were able to determine that a whole number times a fraction gives us a product that is less than the whole number you started out with. When we multiply a mixed number times a whole number, the product is going to be greater than the whole number that we started out with. Okay. Now, as we move into today, we're going to start looking at some different equations for scaling. So if I had the problem 2/3 times 1/2, and I want to know, will the product be more or less than 1/2? So this product right here, put a question mark, is it going to be more or less than 1/2? Okay, well, there's a couple things that I can do here. I can multiply straight across, I can draw a picture. Okay, so we're going to look at both. So if I multiply straight across, I get 2/6. Now, can 2/6 be simplified? Yes. So if we drop down here, I can simplify it by 2, and I can simplify by 2. So I end up with 1/3. Now, the question is 1/3 greater than or less than 1/2? Well, I can draw a picture to show these two things out. So if I draw a picture of 1/3 like this, and a picture of 1/2 like this, if I shade in a half, I'm just going to shade in half of the circle. If I shade in a third, I'm just going to shade in one of these pieces. So, looking at this, 1/3 appears to be much smaller than 1/2. So therefore, 1/3 is less than 1/2. Now, let's look at a different kind of problem. What if I had 3/9 times 1? And I want to know, will the product be more or less than 1? Well, I know whenever I'm multiplying by a whole number, I have to put it over a 1. So I'm going to have 3/9 times 1/1. Now, when I multiply straight across, I'm going to have 3/9 again. Now, if I'm comparing 3/9 to 3/9, well, they're going to be equal to. So anytime I multiply by a whole number or a fraction like 1/1 or 4/4, I'm going to have the two numbers are going to be equal. Those two fractions are going to be equal. Now, when I go to multiply by an improper fraction, so if I had 4/2 times 22/9. Now, I'm multiplying a mixed number by an improper fraction. We said yesterday that an improper fraction could also be called a mixed number because I could make this number into a mixed number. Anytime I multiply a mixed number by an improper fraction or by another mixed number, I'm going to get an answer that is bigger than what I started out with. So the question is, will the product be more or less than 4/2? We can still solve it out to figure it out. So if I multiply this here, I get 32 plus 2, which is 34. So I end up having 34/8 times 22/9. Well, 34 times 22, I'm going to have to work that out over here on the side. 4 times 2 is 8, 2 times 3 is 6, 0, 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 2 is 6, plus 8, 14, carry your 1, 748, and then 8 times 9 I know is 72. Well, now I have a really big improper fraction, so I'm going to have to divide that out. So if I make my division problem over here, well, 72 can go into 74 one time. So 72 times 1 is 72. When I subtract, I'm left with 68. Well, 72 can't go into 68, so that would have to go in 0 times, and then you're left with 0, and you subtract and have 68. So this actually equals 10 and 68 seconds. Now, this ending mixed number right here, sure, this could simplify, but have we already figured out our answer? Will the product be more or less than 4/2? Well, our whole number right here tells us that our product is more than 4/2. Okay. Now let's look at the same thing and look at a mixed number. If I look at 3 1/5 times 3 1/8. Well, this is the same scenario we just dealt with here. So we have to make both of these into an improper fraction if we want to solve. So if we make this 15 plus 1 is 16, we have 16/5, and then we have 24 plus 1, which is 25.
Miss Burchett, call the front office, Miss Burchett.
So I'm going to have to multiply here again. I'll have to multiply out 16 times 25, 30, 12, 13, 14, 15, 0, 5, 2, 0, 2, 3, 4. So we have 400 over 40. And some of you guys, I've showed this trick too, when we have two zeros like this, we can cancel those out, and so we're left with 40/4. Now, this I can easily do in my head. 40 divided by 4 is just 10. So if our question is, will the product be more or less than 3 1/8? Well, 10 is greater than 3 1/8, so therefore it's going to be more. So from what we've done here, we can also make the assumption that when you multiply a mixed number times a mixed number, your product will be greater than the mixed number you started out with. Okay. Hopefully this helps some of you guys. If not, make sure you find me at some point and ask some questions.